Hello and welcome to What Do You Believe? We're really happy and excited to be with you today, and I'm happy that you're here, Francesca. How are you?
Good.
You
Thanks
ready?
for
You ready
asking.
for this?
Yeah, I'm
And
ready.
I'm gonna take a minute here and introduce our guest. Dr. Nagy Eskandar is a medical doctor, and he's a fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons of England. He practiced surgery for 25 years in the UK. His main interest is surgery of the digestive system, and his main passion is science and the Christian faith. He is the author of the book Creation Under the Microscope, and he presented many TV programs in Arabic, including Creation Answers, The Beginnings, You Created Me a Human Being, and Question Mark. How are you, Doctor?
I'm fine. Thank you, David.
We're
Yes.
really happy and excited to have you.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here in this very important program, really.
So to start, if you don't mind, I want to ask you a couple of personal questions. I want to know, how did this happen? So you've practiced surgery for 25 years.
That's right.
And now you're here. You're talking to us, and you wanted to do this. So tell me why.
Yes. I was brought up in Cairo, in Egypt, in a Christian family, and it gave me a chance to explore the Christian faith early on in my life. And I discovered that Christianity is not just sets of rules and regulations to follow, but it is a personal relationship with God through the forgiveness of sin through the Lord Jesus Christ. So I accepted the Christian faith, and that's affected me really in all aspects of my decisions in life. I wanted to be a doctor. I got all the grades to go to the university to study medicine. I graduated, and then I went to the United Kingdom to take my higher surgical training, and I got my fellowship of the Royal College of Surgeons in London and Glasgow, and I practiced surgery for 25 years. But at the moment, I'm interested in opening the debate about science and the Bible, and the question of God, and the question of the Bible: can we trust that book or not? And can we live by it or not in this modern 21st century?
So specifically for our show, what do you believe? What do you want to accomplish here? What do you want everyone that's watching right now to get out of the show?
I'd like to help everybody to start thinking for himself and herself, to make right decision based on real information, not to take anything for granted, because we need really to study issues deeply and get to the bottom of it, and then make our decision if we accept or refuse. Because if we know the truth will set us free. There is a lovely verse in the Bible, actually, David, and we'll see that on the screen. The Apostle Paul said to a church in Thessalonica, test everything, hold into the good. So in this program, we'll test everything. All the ideas are opened, all the discussions are opened. Nothing is prohibited at all. We'd like really good discussion to reach to the truth, because the truth will set us free.
Great, thank you so much. And to everyone watching, this is what we want to get to you. So feel free, our information are going to be on the screen. Email us, contact us with any questions that you have. And Francesca, we're going to hear from you. We want to hear your questions and everything that you have for us. I'm going to start with you, Doctor, with the first main question for us now. So there's the faith, there's the Christian faith, there's the Bible, and there's science. And for a lot of us, what we learn maybe in school, what we hear in society, it doesn't work together. Is there a contradiction between the Christian faith, the Bible, and science, or not?
That's really a very important question. Is there a contradiction between the Bible, which is the reference point for the Christian faith, and the science? I'd like to put this on the screen. There is a science and the Bible, and see if there is a contradiction. This is very important to answer, because if we don't answer this question, really it will disturb all our life. So let me start by putting this brain. God created our brain, God created our mind, and He wants to use them. We don't put our mind in neutral when we communicate with God, because God says you love God from all your heart. Let me just give you the story of Dan Brown, the person who wrote Da Vinci Code, and he's not a Christian at the moment. He said that he was brought up as a religious young boy, and when he was in grade 8 or 9, he started to ask questions about the origin of the universe and the cosmos, and did we start with the Big Bang, or did God create? So he went to ask his minister this question, and unfortunately the answer he got is this: the nice boys don't ask that question. That was very sad, really very sad. As a result, he said, a light bulb went off, and he rejected the Christian faith, and he is anti-Christian at the moment. This program actually is to reverse that attitude. We need to bring all the questions on the table, discuss them with very open mind, and then come to the truth. And I like everyone to search the truth for himself. We are here just to open the discussion and come to some conclusions depending on your research yourself. Right, back again to the question. Is there a contradiction between Bible and science? In order to answer this question properly, we need to define what is science and what is the Bible, and then we see if there is a contradiction or not. So we need to think, and what is science? This is the big question we'd like to start with. There are two types of science. Science means information or knowledge. So there are two types of science: operational science and historical science or origin science. Operational science means that we do the experiment under same conditions, we get the same results, and there is no contradiction between the Bible and that type of science. This type of science gives us all the technology, gives us the aeroplanes, gives us the antibiotics, gives us understanding of DNA. There is no problem at all with this type of science and the Bible. There is another science, which is the origin science or historical science. Things that happened in the past, we cannot repeat them in the present, so we have two different starting points. One starting point saying matter is everything, and by chance and time and laws of nature, life can begin. That's the atheistic view. There is another starting point which says God is the source of life and He's all-powerful and He created life. And that's the area of debate that we're going to enter into. So let me put the definition of operational science to be clear before everybody. It is a scientific method by which we have observable, repeatable experiments. Under controlled environment, we discover patterns of recurrence of behavior, and that is really in the physical universe that we live in. So the operational science is the practical science that we do in the laboratory, and we have no problem at all with that type of science and the Bible. The operational science gives us all the technology that we enjoy, gives me my computer I'm using, gives me this wonderful studio that we are in. That is operational science, and we have no problems with that at all, and there is no contradiction between operational science and the Bible. Let me just show you this little video clip which will give us the difference between operational science and historical science.
Have you ever heard this? Billions of years ago, there was an explosion in space. Or 100,000 years ago, this happened or that happened. Or even, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Question, how does anyone know? I mean, was anybody there to observe it? Well, actually somebody was, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Check this out. First of all, we need to recognize that there is a huge difference between observational science and historical science. Both are valuable, but very different. Let's define the two real quick, shall we? Observational science is simply when we observe something and experiment to draw conclusions. It involves repeatable experimentation and observations in the present. It's through observational science that we find cures for diseases and build space shuttles, stuff like that. Now, through historical science, we consider things that happened in the past, but they cannot be checked in the same way. I mean, we don't have access to the past like we do the present because, well, it's gone, right? All we really have is speculation, or at best, circumstantial evidences of past events based on what we see in the present. That's not to say that we can't make intelligent guesses about the past, or form reasonable inferences from rocks or fossils in the present, but we certainly cannot directly test our conclusions because we cannot repeat the past. Got it? So, does that mean historical science is unimportant? Not at all. Let's drop an example down here for a minute and take a look at the Eiffel Tower. You know, that 19th century Parisian monument designed by Gustave Eiffel that stands 1,063 feet tall, which was built as the entrance for the 1889 World's Fair and is still the tallest building in Paris today, visited by millions of people each year? Yeah, that one. Well, guess what? Everything I just told you is true, but how do we test it? Well, applying observational science, we can, of course, observe the Eiffel Tower anytime we're in Paris. It's here in the present. Then, we can continue by testing the height and comparing it to all the other structures in Paris and confirm the claim that it is indeed the tallest building in Paris. But that's the extent of the kind of facts that can be proved by observational science in reference to this claim. How do we really know that Gustave designed it? How do we really know it was built in the 19th century as an entrance to the 1889 World's Fair? How do we really know how many people visited? That's all in the past. It can't be repeated. For that kind of information, we need to go outside the limits of observational science and discover what has been communicated to us through historical documents and eyewitness accounts. And furthermore, we have to believe those eyewitnesses and documents are trustworthy. The same is true when we talk about the origin of the Earth. The Earth is here. We all agree with that. So, does observational science confirm that the world was created by God? And are there trustworthy documents and eyewitness accounts that confirm it? Well, let's take the last part first. In short, what we're really asking is my original question: was anybody there to observe it? The answer is yes. God was there, and He told us how He created. He inspired people to write down His very words that became books that were compiled into a complete book called the Bible, which has been verified over and over again and has demonstrated itself to be totally trustworthy in all it claims and teaches. Even secular scholars will concede that the Bible accurately records historical events. Anyway, we have the most trustworthy revelation from the most trustworthy eyewitness. Now, what about observational science? Does it confirm the Bible? Yes. And what's extremely important to realize is the observable fact that the universe is logical and orderly. That makes sense only if its creator is logical and has imposed order on his creation. It doesn't make sense at all if the universe is just an accident of a huge explosion. Also, our minds are able to comprehend many things about the universe, and that's only possible if the creator of the mind gave us the ability and desire to explore the universe. It doesn't make sense if our brains are byproducts of chance because we couldn't trust their conclusions to ever be accurate. And lastly, it only makes sense that we can observe and repeat an experiment if the universe consistently obeys the same laws from day to day, which only makes sense if a lawgiver created it that way and upholds it. So to be bluntly honest, science itself, whether observational or historical, is only possible because God exists and the Bible is true. I could go on, but enough said.
I hope this little clip will explain the difference between these two types of science. The operational science that we practice every day in the laboratory, that is really wonderful, and that there is no contradiction with the Bible with that type of science. And the type of science of the operational science is really can only happen if there is a lawgiver. If we are trying to find a law, that means there is a lawgiver. So the science, the practical science, can be operated upon because there is a creator. Now, the historical science, as I said, is things that happened in the past. We cannot repeat them in the present, and we have two different starting points. So let me just summarize the historical science now. The historical science, or the origin science, is like a legal historical method. Like if you examine an accident scene and you try to find somebody who was killed, for example, and you find a bottle of poison or a knife or a note that is a suicidal note, you try to build a picture of what had happened because you cannot repeat it. You can't repeat the accident again. So you try to have a starting point. And sometimes you have the legal system criminating somebody, saying this person has committed this type of killing or something like that. And then after 10 years, there is another evidence and this man is free and there is another person to be accused. So the historical science starts with assumptions, not the realities.
Doctor, if you don't mind,
Sure.
we'll take a small break so
Yeah.
that we can, think about all that and we
Sure.
have questions and we can discuss a little bit more.
Yeah.
You're giving us a lot of information, so we need to process it.
Sure.
We'll be right back.
Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like a copy of this episode, please call 714-709-4300 or email us at info@alkarmatv.com. You can also visit our website at www.alkarmatv.com. Also, you can write to P.O. Box 3610, Seal Beach, California 90740.
Welcome back to What Do You Believe? And right now we have a question from Francesca. Go ahead.
Hi. So I wanted to ask you, in our last segment, we talked about the difference between observational and historical science. And we've come to the conclusion that there is a Big Bang as a result of what we've observed in the universe now, even still today. What is the difference between that and what we can take as fact from the Bible?
That's a great question, Francesca. What we observed really is the world is expanding. and that's by Hubble telescope. In 1929, Edwin Hubble started to look at the universe, and he found the universe is expanding. And initially, they thought the universe is static and eternal. So because it's expanding, we assumed it is coming from one little point called singularity. But this is an assumption. It's not an observation. It is an assumption. And with this assumption, we have major problems, because when the matter and energy are concentrated in a small little spot like the singularity, the laws of physics will not work. So to start the Big Bang, it needs a miracle, right? So now we are talking about assumptions, not observations. Yeah, we all agree that the world is expanding. And actually, the Bible says that God stretches out the heaven, but this is, I will not refer to that just now, right? But what I'm saying here is, yes, what we observe is the world expanding. No doubt about that. But we cannot assume that we started from this singularity, and matter and energy, from where the energy came and from the matter came, to be concentrated in very specific small point. So we can't say the Big Bang is a fact. The Big Bang is an assumption. It's a theory based on some observations, yes. But these observations are interpreted by a mind trying to explain the matter is everything. So that is the difference. So we can't say the Big Bang is science and the Bible is theology. No, the Bible is telling us what happened in the past. And we need a creator. We need somebody to put information into the system, because the system cannot create information by itself. So that is the difference, really. So I hope that will just shed some light on your question, but we'll discuss the Big Bang in full detail. Actually, in this program, Francesca will study biology, geology, astronomy, and the fossils and the dinosaurs and all of that. So we will discuss that in detail, but that is the initial response to your question, which is the Big Bang is based on assumptions. It's not based on fact. Yeah, there are observable things, but we can understand them in a different way.
Okay.
So Doctor, like if we're going to talk about like historical science and we're going to look at everything that's happening, there's also a lot of research, or at least we're told there's a lot of research.
Yeah.
And it's basically, we're trying to understand what happened, and we do research, and we have a hypothesis that we're trying to gather evidence to either, say this is our theory or not. Yeah. So what about all that research? There's a lot of research. There's a lot of evidence. So is that, because if it contradicts the Bible, or if it's saying something different than the Bible, and the Bible doesn't have that evidence or the research made, so what do you think about that?
Yeah. In your discussion, David, you mixed between two words, research and evidence. I encourage research, and there is a lot of creation research as well, by the way. And we have to examine the universe and examine everything and hold into the good, as we established earlier on in our program. But there is no evidence, there is no solid evidence, because everything is built on your starting point. Is the starting point is materialistic, that means matter is everything, or there is a source of information? That is the starting point, and that's the battleground, if you like. Let me just illustrate that with a little test. We'll have a little test in the studio here, and for all the audience as well. What I'm putting on the screen now is two semicircles on the screen, as you can see now on your television. And my question is, what was it originally? And I like everyone to have a picture in his and her mind, and you here in the studio have a picture, but don't tell me what it is, okay? So what we are seeing is two semicircles, and there is a gap in between them, and my question is, what was it originally? Let us see the possibilities. Could it be like this? Yes. Could it be like this? Possible. Could it be like this? Possible.
That's what I was thinking.
I trust you, David. Yeah. Could it be like this? Probably most of us thought of D. But in actual fact, my question really, you cannot answer it at all, because I showed you two semicircles in the present, and I asked you what it was originally in the past. So you don't have information to tell me what it was in the past, because actually there was nothing missing. It was built that way. So this little example will just highlight the difference between operational science that I can see at present and origin or historical science, things that happened in the past. So these two semicircles were like this originally, but we start to use our imagination with the different possibilities. So we cannot be confident that any of them was right, because it was designed originally as two circles, as two semicircles. So that is the difference between operational science and historical science. I showed you two arrows in the present. I asked them what it was like in the past. The answer is I cannot answer this question because I was not there in the past. Yeah? So that's just to highlight the difference between the two types of science, because that will be very helpful when we start to study biology and go in details of the Darwinian evolution, and when we start geology and the layers of the Earth and the fossilization and how it happened, and then when we come to the question of the Big Bang and the origin of the universe. All of that is essential. Remember in the first segment when I mentioned Dan Brown, when he started to ask this question, people said, oh, good boys or nice boys don't ask this question. No, nice boys do ask these questions. And we'd love to address these questions in our program. Right. Let me just come to the observational science. Observational science is great. And I use the observational science in my surgery, and it's essential. And my colleague who is an atheist, he will practice the same observational science and will come to the same conclusion, right? But observational science have its own limitation, because there are things that I have to depend on historical evidence. Let me just put this picture in front of all of us now. We have 5 senses by which we recognize things. We have the touch, we have the hearing, we have the smell, we have the taste, we have the vision. These are the 5 senses by which we recognize the world we live in. Anything lies outside the 5 senses we cannot comprehend. God is a spirit, so God is not a matter, is not a material thing. So he lies outside the 5 senses. So I can't say because I can't test God in the laboratory, that means he doesn't exist. That's not logical. Because the method I'm using is the 5 senses, but the 5 senses are limited, and God is beyond the 5 senses. It doesn't mean he doesn't exist, it is just he is beyond them. And let me just take an example, for example, hearing. All these senses have limitations. So we hear within a certain wavelength. If it is too high or if it is too low, we cannot get it, despite the fact we have sound ears. So we have the ultrasound, that's what's beyond the sound, and we use that as a mechanism really in X-rays to discover things in the body and things like that. Ultrasound, it is sound waves, but it gives you a picture rather than you hear them as a sound. So what I'm trying to say here is we have 5 senses by which we recognize the material world we live in. God lies outside the 5 senses. So we cannot say because I can't test God in the laboratory, he doesn't exist. That is illogical. That's not going with the normal logic. Like, how can you measure how many kilograms of love in your heart? How many kilograms of hate in your heart? You cannot measure it with this unit. You measure it differently. So that's the way to approach this subject.
Doctor, can I ask you a question about
Sure.
this? So you mentioned that now we can't see God, we can't test that he exists, you know. Do you think that in the future it would be possible at all for us to find some sort of mechanism or sense by which to prove his existence in the same way we've, developed ultra-red and all these different scopes of color that we were never able to see before?
Right. That depends on the nature of God. We are using, all these telescopes and things are examining material things, but God is not material. So we'll not develop a method in the laboratory to discover God. We can comprehend him by his creation, by his revelation in the Bible. As a Christian, I believe the Bible is the word of God. I have evidence of truth of the Bible, but that's another topic. And we can see him through the Lord Jesus Christ. So for God as a spirit for us to understand him, he needs to reveal himself to us. We cannot just invent things. Imagine if this table start to think, what is the carpenter or the person who built me looks like? Does he have legs? Does he have arms? Does he have... The table cannot examine the manufacturer that made it. He has to reveal himself to the table. So in the material world, we have material methods to examine things, and that's great, and we all agree about them. But with God, we have to accept His revelation to us to make sure that the Bible is true, and that's another subject in itself. And then see the creation. Can this creation happen by chance and laws of nature, or does it need a creator? So I think this is the methodology in dealing with this issue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, and thank you, Francesca, for your questions. We know we still have a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions
Of
out
course.
there, and I'm sure there's a lot of answers, but we'll continue next time. I just want to leave you guys with these words. Keep on asking, and you will receive what you ask for. Keep on seeking, and you will find. Keep on knocking, and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, everyone who seeks finds, and to everyone who knocks, the door will be opened. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon, and we'll try to ask more questions and answer more questions the next time in What Do You Believe?